Hey there, Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Ion College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me. He's at home in Connecticut. I'm in a hotel room in New York City doing studio work for CBS Sports Network. If you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like button like you're Brandon Davies. You have consent. If you haven't yet, subscribe to that YouTube channel. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, honestly, I feel like at this point, if you haven't done it, you're probably not going to. So we maybe start skipping that part. But like, I'm following instructions. Please, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let's get into it. The NCAA Division I Transformation Committee on Tuesday officially recommended, you probably read, allowing 25% of teams in sports with at least 200 schools to compete in championship events, among them the NCAA tournament. There are 363 Division I men's basketball teams. So what that suggests is a 90-team NCAA tournament. But Norlander, as you pointed out on Twitter, just because the NCAA tournament might soon be allowed to expand to 90 teams doesn't mean it will expand to 90 teams. So why don't we start with you explaining exactly what this development does and does not mean?
Good morning, GP. Hello to everyone. Thanks for watching. Click again, like and subscribe if you can, if you have not already. If you're listening afterward, you want to go ahead and do that. All right. So yeah, Tuesday was a long-awaited day. Just in terms of 2022 was the year when the Transformation Committee met on almost a weekly basis and talked about a whole bunch of stuff. And while the initial belief of that committee was that it would potentially bring wholesale changes to the nature of what it even meant to be a Division I institution and what Division I high major college athletics look like, that's really not what happened and transpired on Tuesday. And there are definitely people around college athletics that are a little let down and certainly underwhelmed by what did happen. I think context with all this is also very important. So we're obviously going to talk about the recommendation to allow sports to expand their championship tournaments. But in talking to people last fall and even this week, a couple of them have been pointed to note that while this is certainly a recommendation, and it is part of it, it is there, so much of the energy and time and discussion of what the Transformation Committee was doing throughout 2022 didn't really have a lot to do with expanding postseason championships. So this is part of it, but if for anyone that's seeing these headlines and thinking this was like the predominant talking point, it might have taken up 5% of the committee's total energy of what they discussed all of last year. So just keep that context in mind there. And I do have what we're going to talk about here is the lead item of the court report this week, my notebook. So I think we'll be able to get that into the podcast description as well, because I think the court report's going to go live as we literally podcast on this. So the most important piece of context, I think, is that just because the Transformation Committee suddenly wrote that, you know, Division I sports with more than 200 participants have the ability, and we might even recommend expanding to postseason fields with as much as 25% of your membership, it doesn't mean like suddenly this new door has been opened. Let's focus obviously on college basketball, men's college basketball, what this podcast is mostly all about. Shouts to camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. The selection committee, which in Division I men's basketball committee, which holds the most power in this, it has always had the option to expand. In many years it has expanded from, you know, the late 60s until 1985. It expanded incrementally and with regularity, and then obviously we went from 64 for almost 2 decades, went to 65 teams once the Mountain West came into form and they didn't want to give up an at-large bid. And then obviously there was the great 68 compromise back in the late 2000s. 2011 was the first 68 team field, and since then there have been opportunities for the tournament to expand. But as my court report piece states, and I spoke with a number of sources across the industry, both this week and in recent months, there has never, even though the opportunity has been there and there have been like informal discussions, it's never seriously ever been considered. So just because the Transformation Committee is putting it out there, and it will shine a big spotlight on men's college basketball because of this, it doesn't mean that it is going to happen, should happen, needs to happen. In fact, I would argue, based on my sourcing, there are a lot of powerful people at the NCAA who do not want the NCAA tournament to expand. There are powerful power brokers involved in the nature of putting on this tournament, even outside of the NCAA, that aren't eager to see this tournament expand and very much like it at its 68-team format with the bracket the way it is, 3 weeks, 3 weekends, and so on and so forth. I don't think the tournament is going to expand. So while the headline, and certainly not expand massively, I don't think that's happening, and not anytime soon, and not before minimally the TV contract with CBS Sports and formerly Turner Sports, it's now Warner Brothers Discovery Sports, that goes until 2032. I frankly would be stunned if we got to 88, 90 teams in the next decade. I don't think we're going to expand at all anytime soon. I do think, ground is plowed decades in advance, right? In the 1980s, like the college football playoff, that's not run by the NCAA, and that dates back to a huge case with the Supreme Court back in the 1980s that eventually paved the way. College football had a bizarre postseason set up forever where, there were like 4 national championships in one year, depending on who won what bowls, like just a different kind of sport altogether. But eventually you got the BCS. Now you have the CFP, and college football has its own autonomy to run that outside the purview of the NCAA. The men's NCAA tournament is the only money-making operation for the NCAA. The women's NCAA tournament, which is making huge strides and could eventually be a moneymaker, it loses money. The men's NCAA tournament is the only thing that makes money that the NCAA runs, and it makes so much money that it basically affords hundreds and hundreds of schools to be able to field scholarship sports by the dozens across the country there. So a lot of people are very in tune and aware of how good the product is right now, and not wanting to fuss with it too much. You add more teams, you add more games, you add more logistics, you add a lot more cost, you add a lot more travel, and the value proposition of going from 68 to 80 plus 90, there are a lot of people that think that actually monetarily that would not be a good thing, that you're not going to make a lot more money. You might end up winding up losing more money, and then actually the schools that might wanting to get involved in this because of the way the money gets split up with the tournament, it actually makes you go backward financially, at least in the short term there. I do think down the road, years and years from now, going from 68 to 72 on the table, maybe 72 to 76. I do think that compromise could eventually be happening. But just based off of conversations I've had with a lot of people, it's not just like we don't really see a lot of upside in expanding right now. There are people invested in this tournament, GP, who are, I would say, pretty dug in on their heels about not wanting to expand. So we might look up in a year or two and see that whole expansion thing, that was the baseball tournament, the softball tournament, the lacrosse, that stuff might apply. In men's basketball, I'm not saying I'm like a lone voice in this, because I'm not, but I'm very skeptical based off of my conversations that there will be any significant and major NCAA tournament expansion at any point in the next decade.
And that's what I wanted you to say and explain, because I think some people yesterday see the tweets and it says NCAA tournament is going to be allowed to expand up to 90. And that gets translated into, oh, wow, the NCAA tournament is going to expand to 90. And as you just explained, that's not only is that not necessarily true, it is probably not true. So just given the attention that got yesterday in the past 24 hours, I thought it was a reasonable place to start and address. I don't want to spend much more time on it, but I will say this. I'm personally not somebody who believes expansion of the NCAA tournament will ruin college basketball. It's never ruined the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball or the World Cup or anything else. So when you hear somebody say the NCAA tournament expanding would ruin college basketball, they're being over dramatic. I think their heart's in a good place, because I agree with them in the sense that it's not good for college basketball. But based on history of other sports, the idea that playoff expansion, which is what this would be, would ruin the sport, that's simply untrue. But what is true is that the NCAA tournament does not need to expand to make sure all the good teams are in. We already put average teams in the bracket every year. I promise you, good teams really don't get left out. We don't need more average teams. And either way, basing an argument in favor of NCAA tournament expansion on the idea that you need to include 25% of 363 teams is just super silly, especially when around a third of those 363 teams, and maybe more, don't matter at all. Hopefully the smart people with power in the sport understand as much. I trust that they do. But if they don't, and they do make a move on this thing, they will be moving the sport of college basketball in the wrong direction. Let's move on. It's been a wild couple of nights in the sport. We're going to touch on some of these interesting developments next, but first, a word from our partners.
We are charged to protect these kids.
Go! I'm a police officer for North Minneapolis and coach for the North High School. Go! These kids don't trust cops.
It's definitely a difficult time right now.
Kind of weird, but I'm building bonds with police.
The violence is nonstop. You can hear the gunshots. When them lights flicker at 7 o'clock, you ain't hearing none of that.
So it's been a wild couple of nights in college basketball. Let me run you through some of these results. Number one, Purdue lost Monday night at home to Rutgers, 65-64. Then on Tuesday night, number 6, Texas lost at home to Kansas State, 116-103. And number 11, Virginia lost at Pitt, 68-65. And then number 21, New Mexico lost at Fresno State, 71-67 to leave us with 0 undefeated teams remaining in college basketball. Deadleg, question. Is this anarchy or is this just college basketball? I think it's anarchy. I personally believe that it's anarchy.
You know what? I'm with you. Anarchy and CBB just barely beat our January 1 prediction deadline, by the way. Rutgers takes it down. By the way, Rutgers, per my research, and I dug into this more time than I needed to. If you have facts to prove me otherwise, come find me. But I don't think this is Rutgers is the first school ever to knock off to be responsible for ending an undefeated season of a conference foe when that conference foe was top ranked in the country in back-to-back seasons. It did it to Purdue last season, did it to Purdue again this season. Shouts to Rutgers, shouts to Jersey Mike's, shouts to the real rack there. And
somebody thinks he's Jared Burson.
Not me.
That's you. You're over here doing a Jared Burson impersonation on the podcast.
I've been digging up stats. Where the hell do you think trivia time came from, man? Okay. Well predates JB. No doubt about it. That was more shocking to me than New Mexico losing on the road to a sub 500 Fresno State team. I thought Purdue was going to handle business, even though Rutgers is the better team. Purdue's better than New Mexico, and yeah, we've had some good noise here. Now, without having an undefeated team left, it's a small thing, not a major thing. Like it normally doesn't happen this early. There was a lot of people shared this stat, and I actually semi-regularly documented this for the site, but I had not updated this since 2020. The last unbeaten team normally lasts until late January. We obviously had Gonzaga get all the way to the title game in 21. Kentucky made it to the Final Four in 15. So to have it be this early is unusual. And we just have a storyline that's not there anymore. Like you get a team or two that can get into mid-January with a bagel in the L column. That's always a good thing, a fun thing, speculation on how long it'll go. But that's just off the table now. And I think what we're going to have is I think we'll probably have every team that gets to the tournament is going to have for sure at least 3 losses. There's a potential, and I'd be interested.
Houston? You think Houston's going to have 3 losses?
Yeah, I'll say Houston 3.
I think
they
might.
The only one.
But I'm not sure. I think they got a chance. They're the one that's got the best chance, obviously, because they are, in some ways, you could reasonably argue the best team, and they play in the American Athletic Conference.
Gonzaga already has 3. Stands to reason Gonzaga will drop one more. If your mind you're thinking, well, Gonzaga, they only have 2. Might they run the table? They've already got 3. Houston's the one that could do it. I actually think the results here will help Houston get a 1 seed eventually. But everyone else, I mean, we've got 12 one-loss teams right now. We'll just have a tournament. If everyone does have at least 4 losses, I don't know how often that's happened since we went to 64 and 85.
Jared Burson does.
If we've had how many tournaments we've had where every team in the field has had at least 4 losses there. And to me, it won't indicate that there isn't a great team. And that'll be another trope that gets trotted out there and whatever. I actually think there's still the chance for the likes of Houston, Arizona, Kansas, UConn, UCLA. I think there are teams out there, maybe Alabama, Tennessee that could actually like genuinely become great teams. But yeah, we've had some upsets and some surprises there, and I do enjoy it. GP, there's a lot of intriguing and surprising storylines that come with all this stuff. Like we're gonna get to K-State, and just when you look at the teams that are have gaudy records and they just aren't often in this kind of spot there, it brings a little bit more spice. And I think we've actually got a little more intrigue with a lot of these league races as we, introduce 2023 and get ready to really get going with league play in earnest.
I got this from Andy Toolin, CBS Sports researcher.
Start shouting out our guy, okay? Because that's the real one right there.
I know, but I just think it's funny pretending that Jared Burson is ESPN Stats and Info, even though he doesn't work there anymore.
Yeah,
I just like doing that. That's where I get my own pleasure. This is the second earliest that every team has lost a game in the past 45 seasons. The only earlier date came in 2017-18 when everybody had at least one loss on December 30th. And that is the byproduct of Purdue losing on Monday night and New Mexico losing late Tuesday. By the way, the definition of anarchy is a state of disorder due to the absence or non-recognition of authority or other controlling systems. Think about this. Mark Emmert on the way out. Right now, the NCAA basically toothless. That's an absence of authority.
Was Emmert ever an authority?
He thought he was. Remember what he tried to do to Penn State?
I mean, listen.
He thought he was for a second.
You can think a lot of things. Thought doesn't equate to reality.
So there right now there is a non-recognition of authority, and it has created a state of disorder. That's anarchy. What we're living through right now is anarchy. So with all due respect to my friend and colleague, John Rothstein, he needs to update the tweet. It needs to say, is this anarchy? And then just, yeah, it is. It is anarchy.
Talk about that.
It is anarchy. It actually is anarchy.
Can we talk some of Tuesday night's surprising ones here?
You talk about whatever you want.
Let's do it. Well, how about you? I tee you up. You were in studio.
I was.
Okay, so Kansas gets a close one. I'll run it down, and then you tell me the one you want to talk about most, or maybe the one that might have inspired the most chatter in the bullpen in the green room there at the CBS Sports studios. There, Kansas wins by 3 at Texas Tech in a really, really good game that Tech almost came back and stole. Marquette continues to just make me look like an idiot. Shouts to Marquette. Obviously, GP hates that fan base. Pittsburgh goes and gets to 4-0 for the first time in its history in this conference in the ACC. It joined a decade ago, had never been 4-0, started 4-0, beats Virginia, and in doing so gets obviously an emotional win for that school in light of what happened Monday night, in Cincinnati with DeMar Hamlin, who played football at Pitt. And actually that game itself, I mean, Virginia, you watched it, you saw the UVA strong shirts, and that program has also been affected by a tragedy of a different kind with its football program there. So actually, two programs coincidentally wound up meeting that have been impacted by things with their football counterparts at that university, even though they are different instances altogether there. Good win for Pitt, though. I think that's what is Pitt? Well, we're starting to find out. Kansas State, shouts to Andy Toolin for this one, too. Bring up the stat he dropped here. It wins 116-103 at Texas. And it's not just that it dropped 116. It was the second most points scored in a regulation game on the road against a top 10 team in the past 73 years. The only other instance of this being worse for a home top 10 team was when Oral Roberts obviously dropped 122 on 6th-ranked Oklahoma back in 88.
I remember that.
When Oral Roberts won 152-122.
I remember.
Must have been a 97 possession game there. Kansas State doing that remaining one loss. It will be in my power rankings when they refresh on Thursday. Have to give them shouts there. And then New Mexico obviously ends its undefeated run by losing against Fresno State. Those were probably the biggest. Kentucky did. You got to win. Looked pretty decent. LSU had a good fight, 74-71. I suppose that's also notable. But to you, are you with me? As much as I want to say Pitt, Texas was playing extremely well, and that's a road game. Kansas State has one loss at Butler more than a month ago. It's got 7 wins in a row. It's 13-1. And holy crap, that win is good enough to make me really twist my perception of what K-State is, GP, because before this I thought it's going to have a shot, probably be involved, but eventually going to the NIT. Maybe that still winds up happening. They got to go play Baylor on the road this week, but winning like that at Texas, I am looking at that team and Jerome Tang in a different way than I was before. And listeners to the podcast, could have been surprised by that, but GP, if you just listen to the Sunday episode, GP extolled the virtues of one Jerome Tang and how good of a job he's doing. It really set up well for what they did on Tuesday night.
I want to touch on most of those things, but to answer the question you asked directly, the thing that got the most attention in the broadcast center was Kansas State, not just winning at Texas, but like dominating Texas at Texas, really from start to finish. And among the reasons it got the most attention is because our host was the great Brent Stover, who is a Kansas State graduate and a diehard Kansas State fan. He was a student athlete there. He was he ran cross country. He was a competitive jogger in the Big 12. He jogged competitively. And so he lives and die with Kansas State. And over the weekend he died, when Kansas State had to play Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. That was death. But these past 2 games with the men's basketball program have been unbelievable. And Saturday night they beat West Virginia in overtime to get what I think you can reasonably call the first big notable win of the season. And then they back it with a truly shocking performance at Texas. Now, we might look back and go, okay, then maybe that wasn't so shocking. Maybe we just didn't know. But I don't think anybody thought Kansas State's going to go to the Moody Center and not just beat Texas, but beat them bad. And what was most interesting about it is they're up 20, and then Texas, there was a few times in that second half where Texas made a run. And it was okay, here we go. And as soon as Texas made the run, Kansas State pushed it back up to 15. They kept pushing it back, creating separation, and Texas never seriously threatened. And so Kansas State, to me, is now one of the biggest stories in the sport. This is a program that won 14 games all of last season. They've got 13 wins already this season. And like I explained on a previous episode, this is not really a deal where, the new staff is winning with the old staff's players. 7 of the top 8 scorers at Kansas State right now are players who were not in the program last season. They are players that Jerome and his staff enrolled in a matter of months and have built into this really nice thing. Kansas State started 77th at KenPom. As of this moment, they're up to number 31. They've got big wins over Texas, West Virginia. They're up to 18th in the net, number 8 in KPI, 27th at Torvik. And I ran them all the way from unranked on Tuesday morning to 13th in the top 25-1 on Wednesday morning. And that
sounds like anarchy to me.
I told you we're experiencing anarchy right now. But when you look at the resume, because I can acknowledge that is a big jump for January of 2023, or any year. But when you look at the resume, I don't know what you do with them except put them way up there. They're 3-1 in quadrant 1 with 0 losses outside of the first quadrant. They beat the Texas team at Texas that smashed Gonzaga, beat the LSU team that beat Arkansas, beat the West Virginia team that's top 25 at KenPom. I'm going to respect the resume. And when you start to look at it a little closer, they got good players. This isn't man, I don't know how these players are doing this thing. Keontae Johnson was the preseason SEC player of the year before he was sidelined by a medical condition at Florida. He's now averaging 18.4 points and 6.9 rebounds per game. So the guy who was once a preseason SEC player of the year is Kansas State's current leading scorer. Marquise Noel is averaging 15.9 points, 8.5 assists, 2.5 steals. He has been awesome and was crazy awesome at Texas. Desi Sills was a rotation player for an Elite 8 team at Arkansas. Kansas State has good players. And it seems pretty clear to me they've got a good team and maybe a great team. Listen, they were I went and looked at the preseason Big 12 poll. They were predicted to finish last. I went and looked at our Big 12 projections. Every one of us picked them to finish last, and they still might. That's important to understand. Every school in the Big 12 is in the top 45 at KenPom. A quality team is going to have to finish last, and it might still be Kansas State, but I think we can agree on this. At this point, doesn't look like it's going to be Kansas State. It looks like Kansas State has got an NCAA tournament team, and that is incredible work by Jerome and his staff, given what they inherited and the league in which they have to compete in.
Staying in the Big 12, Kansas is now 13-1. Will move to number 1 in my power rankings on Thursday. Does that align with what you have in your latest top 25 and 1? Are the Jayhawks now your number 1 team?
No. Why would I just jump them all the way up to number 1?
I'm setting it up for the listeners.
Oh, no, I still have Kansas at number 5. And if you want to argue they should be number 2.
Oh boy, they're coming for you now. Like, I didn't realize they were 5. Yeah,
well, by the time I pointed out that Bryce Thompson got hit in the head on Saturday, and now Kansas, according to some Kansas fans, are slightly they think they're underrated. It's so funny to me. I get these wild tweets I'll do a 5-minute monologue about how Bill Self is the greatest coach in college basketball, and it's not even debatable. And then I'll say,
doesn't matter.
Bryce Thompson did get hit in the head. And they're like, Bryce Thompson didn't get hit in the head. The Kansas bias still exists, huh, Parrish? I'm like, what are you talking about?
For ages. Yep.
Are you people crazy? And the answer, of course, is they are crazy. But it's understandable because we're dealing with anarchy right now. It makes people crazy. So I've my top 5 right now is Houston at 1, UConn at 2, Purdue at 3, Arizona 4, Kansas 5. But at this point, you could put those 5 schools in basically any order. There's
saying this. You love it. This is your thing this year.
I think it's true.
4 schools, you put these 5 schools in any order, and I'm not going to argue with you. You love it.
It's anarchy. This is the byproduct of anarchy.
I think you just say, you know what? You can put these 363 schools in any order, and basically you can make an argument.
I don't even acknowledge at least a third of those schools. I don't even acknowledge that they exist. They might as well all be on the Pac-12 network. Those at least a third of Division I schools, as far as I'm concerned, play on the Pac-12 network every night. I don't even acknowledge them.
Question for you here. All right, Kansas State is 3-1 in quad 1. Pitt is 4-1 in quad 1. Now Pitt is 11-4. Kansas State has only lost 1 game. Kansas State plays in the tougher conference. Pittsburgh won't have as many quad 1 opportunities, but it might have more ability to move up and maybe establish itself in an NCAA tournament resume. Pitt is 64th at KenPom right now. Let me bring up real quick net rankings. I'm going to say Pitt is 48 in net. I'm going to just blind guess. It was 68 in the net. I was going to say right now, more likely Pitt or K-State in the NCAA tournament. Considering the slope that K-State will have to climb, which one would you lean?
I would lean toward Kansas State. I think the Octagon of Doom will provide an incredible home court advantage. And at this point, it ain't like they got a 8-10 probably does it in the Big 12, doesn't it?
Whew. Yeah, with where they are now.
Yeah, with where they are right now. Hey, and they're 2-0. All right. So how about this? Can you go 6-10 in the Big 12 the rest of the way? That's probably good enough. So I would lean toward Kansas State.
Oh man.
Can you go 6-10 the rest of the way?
I would say they need 7 wins one way or another. Get one in the Big 12 tournament. As always, no team exists in a vacuum when it comes to tournament selection. But yes, this far out, 7 wins, you get to 20 with K-State, you're gonna be dancing there. Pitt is equally as good of a story right now, though. Just to have this team, I said on HQ this morning, I don't know if this team will make the tournament, but it's not going to be one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in the ACC. And bizarrely, that's where this team was. I did catch one of your hits on CBS Sports Network on Tuesday, GP, and you just reminded viewers that, this was a school once upon a time making 13 straight NCAA tournaments, out of the Big East.
It was 13 times in a 15-year span.
That's what it was.
Yeah. And it's easy for, as bad as Pitt was under Kevin Stallings and frankly has been in recent years, it might be easy for younger folks to just assume, well, I guess Pitt's just always been bad, but that's not true. Pitt made the NCAA tournament 13 times in a 15-year span from 2002 to 2016 under Ben Howland and Jamie Dixon. And how about this? Haven't been back to the tournament since 2016. Haven't even had a winning record since 2016. but now they're 11-4, got wins over Virginia, North Carolina, 4-1 in quadrant one opportunities. Has it happened a little slower for Jeff Capel than I would have guessed? Yes. And I think Jeff would agree with that statement. But it looks like he's got this in a good place right now. In early January, as always, a lot of stuff can change. There's twists and turns to every season. But if I'm a Pitt fan, I'm fired up right now. And if I'm a Kansas State fan, I'm fired up right now. And neither one of those fan bases thought in the preseason that they would have a reasonable reason to be fired up on January 4th.
Pitt beats UNC. You have my curiosity. Pitt beats Virginia. You have my attention. Both those were home wins. And we'll see where it goes. Just a nice early January story. And we will get there, whether it's Pitt, Kansas State, or another 2 or 3 teams, LSU, Missouri, go on down the list of surprises we have at the power conference level. There will be teams that get into the tournament this season that weren't there yet last year, haven't been there 3-4 years, and that's always part of the fun of it. But yeah, I think on Tuesday night, Pitt and K-State were the 2 biggest winners, although Kansas kind of continuing to get it done. Certainly the reigning national champs just continue to roll that way. And then I won't dismiss, like, we don't have to spend really much of time on this because we'll have plenty of other opportunities to talk Vols, but I won't dismiss Tennessee just not even messing around with Mississippi State. 87-53. Like, it was not a game, man. Like, there is something to be said, even though that's not, you can't keep that up over the entire course of the month. But every so often, when you play a conference foe and it's, a top 50 level team, and you're just done. Get out of here. We don't want anything to do with you. And they just blew them out. At least something to be said for that. And in addition to Kentucky winning a close one, doing it the way it did, Jacob Toppin with another good game. So I acknowledge those as well, but they weren't as noisy or as resonant, at least to me, as the Pitt and K-State wins.
Yeah, like, I am glad when I was ranking Mississippi State earlier in the season based on the fact that the Bulldogs were undefeated and had, I think it was, I'm going off the top of my head here, like a win over maybe the Marquette team that had a good win and a win over the Utah team that had a win over Arizona. Like, they hadn't beaten anybody, but they had beaten people that had beaten people, and they were undefeated. So I was like, well, that's a resume that deserves to be ranked. But I did always preface it with, hey, we don't know how good Mississippi State is, but like, based on what they've done and the 0 on the loss column, they deserve to be ranked right now. And it's going the wrong way right now. They've on a 3-game losing streak. They lost that neutral court at Pinnacle Bank, I believe, to Drake. And then, you got 2 tough SEC games that back that up. And so once you lost the Drake game, they were probably headed for a 3-game losing streak, but getting smacked like that, I think it was 16-0 to start the game. And like, Tennessee was shooting above 60% at the half. I mean, it was really, really lopsided from start to finish. So not surprised that Tennessee won. Tennessee's good. Surprised that, frankly, I'm just surprised anytime SEC game is that lopsided. I don't even care who's playing in it. Like, SEC games aren't typically going to be that lopsided, particularly one involving the losing team being, ranked at, earlier in this same season. And then, of course, the night all leads to the standalone game at 11 p.m. Eastern, where we had the final undefeated team, New Mexico, going to Fresno State. And that kept us in studio till somewhere between 1:30 and 2 a.m. And New Mexico loses to a 5-8 team. Fresno State entered the game ranked 250th in adjusted offensive efficiency, according to KenPom, and then shot 50% from the field against New Mexico. And that really changes New Mexico's resume in a way that I think makes them, like, I believe this should be true. I don't know if it will be true, but New Mexico should go from being the last undefeated team in Division I to unranked in the AP poll in a matter of days. I moved them out of the top 25 and 1 on Wednesday morning because now, they've only got 2 wins in the first 2 quadrants, and they've got a quadrant 3 loss. This Fresno State loss is a bad loss. Best win is over unranked St. Mary's. St. Mary's is the one that's got, like, they're really high in some of the predictive metrics, but like, you look at it, and I understand predictive metrics is its own thing, but every time when I'm looking for schools to add to a list of possible top 25 and 1 members, I get to St. Mary's and I go, yeah, no, that doesn't look like something I would rank right now. So the best win is over an unranked St. Mary's, but I can acknowledge St. Mary's is good in the predictive metrics. 0 additional wins over teams in the top 50 of the net. So yeah, I dropped New Mexico completely out of the top 25 and 1. Am I cruel for that, or can you make sense of it?
No, I think that's probably fair. I haven't fully finished my power rankings for tomorrow, but I would think I'll drop New Mexico out after a loss like that, just because of how bad Fresno State is. No, I think that's probably fair. I don't have their schedule up in front of me. If they have a decent opponent next and they win, it's conceivable they might.
Well, the good news is that this year in the Mountain West, I believe the Mountain West is like 5th in the net right now among conferences, and you're going to get games with San Diego State. You're going to get games with Utah State. So you're going to get some quality games in there to offset this Fresno State loss, but it doesn't mean the Fresno State loss isn't a horrendous loss, all things considered, if you are trying to be a top 25 team in America.
Yeah, that's right. And New Mexico's still a good story. We'll see if they can keep keep pace in the Mountain West. If they can finish top 3 in that league, they will be in the tournament. Let's look ahead here, GP. Let's talk Wednesday night games. To you, there's plenty to get to. But I think there are 3 that would be in the running for most intriguing to me. And
okay, let's see if I can guess them. Trivia time. And there's no actual factual answer. It's just like I got to guess what you're thinking. Okay, here we go. You ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Missouri at Arkansas.
Yes.
I mean, Missouri has obviously been a tremendous story under Dennis Gates. Let's go see what you can do at Bud Walton.
That's right.
TCU at Baylor.
No doubt about it.
TCU great in the predictive metrics. I do have TCU in the top 25 and 1. Hadn't really done anything. And I mean, they've won a lot of games. I mean, they won a lot of games. I should but they do have a bad loss on the resume, but 2 of their top 3 scorers didn't play in that game. I think Mike Miles didn't play in that game. And Damian Baum, a little homie from Memphis, didn't play in that game. So it doesn't mean it didn't happen, but you can sort of explain it away. But they're not good in the predictive metrics. But I guess they beat Texas Tech.
They have 4 top
Texas Tech is
wins.
okay. 4 top. Let me rephrase. They've done something. They've done something.
Noted Horned Frog hater.
But 0 wins over currently ranked teams right now. How about that? And a loss on the resume to Northwestern State. So this is an opportunity to be like, okay, let's go win a game against a quality opponent, against a ranked opponent on the road. And so that makes that game intriguing. So 2 are Missouri at Arkansas, TCU at Baylor, and then I think the other one, UConn at Providence.
No doubt about it. Yes.
That's a win in trivia time. It's
not
anarchy.
That's anarchy. UConn at Providence, 8:30 Eastern, Fox Sports 1. You've got TCU at Baylor at 9 on ESPN 2, and then Missouri at Arkansas is a 9:30 Eastern SEC network tip. Those are the 3 biggest there. UConn in the midst of a very intriguing stretch. Lost on Saturday at Xavier. Now it's at Providence. We'll get a Creighton team at home this weekend. That could be pretty interesting overall. And then it will go at Marquette next Wednesday there. So Huskies started 14-0, and I would say the odds are that they're gonna have 2 losses by the time we get to 8 days from now. Providence, Creighton, Marquette, at least one. If they lost 2 more, I wouldn't even be like UConn fans start feeling themselves in a hurry. I understand that because you want your program to be at the level where we should be winning 14 out of our first 15 games in most years. Illogical as that may be, point I'm making here is if they lose tonight at Providence and then they lose at Marquette, while those would be road games, and all 3 losses in that instance would be road losses if they were to beat Creighton at home this weekend in Connecticut, they'd still be freaking out a little bit. But that's a really, really good game there. Matchup wise, Providence, it just doesn't have the roster that UConn does. Now, Bryce Hopkins has been one of the top 10 transfers in the country this season. He's been outstanding. And Ed Croswell has played extremely well alongside Devin Carter. I would say Jared Bynum hasn't even been as good, the big returning guy for Providence, as I thought he would be there. But that building, I think they call it the Amp now, whatever. It's the Dunk. The Dunk is going to be an incredible environment here on Wednesday night. Very, very much looking forward to watching that game. Baylor, I just want to see if it can respond to the bad loss it took against Iowa State. Is it going to come out? Got the home court. Let's see what you can do in this spot here against a TCU team that does. GP's right. Like, it's just got a little more to prove. Won't be expected to win, but let's see if they can keep it competitive.
But I should, like, I want to correct myself. Like, if we were recording this, I would say, hey, let's stop and go back. They have done something. My initial thought was, hadn't done anything. I think that's what I said. That's not true. They've done something, but they haven't beaten a currently ranked team all season, and they got an opportunity to do that on Wednesday night.
Missouri at Arkansas, as you mentioned. I have a note in today's court report about Nick Smith Jr. I spoke to some NBA front office folks, just speculation out there that he might just not return. Now, I talked to Muss as well for the piece, and he's obviously very hopeful. He's just dealing with a knee issue that's been plaguing him a bit, and no one really knows if he's gonna come back or not. Now, Clutch Sports is running Nick Smith's NIL stuff, and in talking to a few NBA people, they said, listen, you go back to the history of how Clutch Sports generally handles this kind of stuff. Like, there are definitely, put it this way, there are front office evaluators who are not expecting to see Nick Smith ever play college basketball again. I'm not outright predicting that. I actually think he will suit up again, but the people that are paid to scout this sport, build franchises, they are skeptical at this point because he has had 2 instances where he has sat out because of a knee, and we are talking about a lock top 10. The other point I make in the court report is it's a bummer. Like, Nick Smith is a tremendous basketball player, and for Arkansas to get Arkansas's had pros, don't get me wrong, but for Arkansas to have, a guy who's local be this good, potential top 5 pick, and he's played 5 games. I mean, he's from Jacksonville, Arkansas. It's just, it's a little bit of more than a little bit. It's a major bummer. He's the latest in a line of just 5-star, one and done lottery pick talents who didn't bypass college. They went to college, and we didn't get to see a lot of them, right? Shaden Sharp never got on the court. James Wiseman was an injury, but he played there 3 games. Go back to Kyrie Irving, played like 9 games at Duke. Think about who else? Michael Porter Jr. barely got on the floor, right? So there have just been times where we've had these, highly touted players that have chosen to go to college, and for one reason or another, the majority of their time there, they never got on the floor. So I hope he returns. There's just no timetable for that to happen. This is a big game. Musselman also told me, a lot of what we wanted to do on offense this year was built around Nick shooting and Trevon Brazil's capabilities. Brazil's out for the year with an ACL. Arkansas is a bad 3-point shooting team. They don't take a lot and they don't make a lot there. Missouri, conversely, is 3rd in the country in points per game. They're dropping almost 90 a night, have the 4th per possession offense. And that is while I'm excited for UConn Providence, Mizzou at Arkansas is the game that I'm tuning in for, because I want to see if Missouri, on the heels of beating Illinois, beating Kentucky, neither of those were road games. Illinois always a true neutral situation with bragging rights. Go into Bud Walton against a good Arkansas team that is shorthanded. How are they going to show up in this one? I expect a fast-paced game. I would love, and I think there's a decent chance that this one actually gets decided in the 90s there. And we have given Missouri plenty of love. It's not like they're just bursting onto the scene here, but you go and do this. If you win at Arkansas and get to 13-1 and still don't have a loss in the SEC, the profile of that program will ascend to a new level. If you lose it, completely understandable, and you'll still be in the mix, and you'll still be interesting. We'll still talk about you. We'll still monitor you, but it would be an expected loss, and so we kind of carry on. We wait to see what happens. You go in and beat Arkansas tonight, Dennis Gates, you do that. Woo! Viable case as a top 15 team in the country if you can pull that off.
I have Missouri right now at number 19 in the country. So they're already close to that point. And for what it's worth, if you missed this week's dribble handoff, we were asked to hand out midseason Coach of the Year awards. And I believe David Cobb took first pick. Just decided he gets to pick first this time, I guess. Didn't even ask, Didn't even say, hey, anybody want to go first? Which is perfectly fine, because David Cobb does the heavy lifting on that. And honestly, he deserves to go first every time if he wants to. He went with Dennis Gates, and no argument for me. If you had
All
to turn
four
into
of our picks were good, though. All four of them have a viable case. I went Patino. Who'd you go with?
I went Matt Painter.
And Kyle Boone went with Dan Hurley. All of those should be coach of the year candidates right now. Yes.
Sure. And now, like if we were doing it today, somebody would go Jerome Tang.
You'd go Jamie Dixon. Yeah.
You'd probably go. I do love Jamie Dixon, and I love TCU. I'm a horn frog.
No.
Look at me. I'm a horn frog.
You take that back into the lab. Take it back into the lab. Yeah, not closer, but not.
People don't realize a Sun Devil impression is not that different than a horn frog impression.
They just learned that.
People don't know that. That's not something people know.
I can hear the cries from Fort Worth already.
Yep.
People don't. People
you
don't.
Might have just put that. Yeah. You might have just put a hex.
Oh, by the way, I should let you know.
Bad.
After I had to remove New Mexico, and I had to find a new team for the top 25 and 1, I removed 2 teams and I had to add 2 teams. One of them, obviously, Kansas State. You know who I put back in the top 25 and 1? Choo choo.
Illinois. Didn't you try and commandeer the Purdue? Didn't that just happen on Sunday and they lost?
Yes,
you're a train terrorist. That's what you are.
I'm not very.
You're
good
a train terrorist.
I'm not very good at driving trains. Illini coming off a big win over Bethune-Cookman.
Okay, that was enough.
Yeah, they bounced back from that humiliating loss with a nice performance against Bethune-Cookman. Honestly, if you look at Illinois' resume and you just forget that you watched them just get run completely off the tracks by me, the resume's still worthy. And so I've got the Illini back in the top 25 and 1. So we went through Wednesday night, Thursday night. Hold
on. There's a few more. I just want to give people a heads up. Wednesday is stacked. We did the 3 biggest ones. Duke at NC State.
Yep.
Just keep. Ken Baum says Duke by 2. Just keep an eye. That's all I'm saying. Penn State at Michigan. 2 programs maybe going in opposite directions there. Michigan like legitimately needs this win. It's not an NCAA tournament team right now. Can Michigan pull that off? They're going to host. That's a 7:00 tip. I'd keep an eye out for that. Oklahoma's in desperate need of a win. It's at home against Iowa State. I watched for that. Georgia, dude, not a tournament team right now, but Georgia's 10-3. Mike White getting it done in year 1. Auburn is going to Georgia, so potentially there's something to learn with that. And then I think Miami's got borderline a top 10 type team in the country. If you really look at what they've done, they're at Georgia Tech, should be a win. But just scooting up rankings potentially. And then North Carolina needs to take care of business at home against Wake Forest. That's a 9:00 tip on ACC Network. It's loaded. That's even before we get, I think Charleston plays at 5 on CBS Sports Network. Charleston, I talked to Pat Kelsey, also in this week's court report. Stunning stat. I cannot believe this stat. Charleston is ranked right now. The CAA had not had a ranked team since Navy in the late 80s. That is unbelievable. Now, VCU and George Mason made the coaches poll GP in the years when they were good, but not the AP. CAA not had a ranked team in the AP top 25 since the 80s. Unbelievable. Charleston's there, 23rd this week. Good on them.
Charleston will be at North Carolina A&T, and that game will be on CBS Sports Network. I'll be in studio for it. Can we move to Thursday?
Let's go.
Purdue at Ohio State, Indiana at Iowa, USC at UCLA. Those are the 3 biggest games from my perspective.
For sure. Purdue could go from undefeated number 1 team to back-to-back losses. Certainly possible. That game just intrigues me in general because Ohio State just as attractive of an offense as we've seen in a long time, I believe. Someone asked in the comments earlier in the show if you're still turned on by Chris Holtman's schemes. Feel free to noodle on that. Indiana at Iowa. We'll note Patrick McCaffrey announced on Tuesday he is taking a leave of absence from playing college basketball. Was upfront and transparent. He's dealing with anxiety issues, and he said, "I'm not at my best. I'm not going to. It's not fair to me or my team." He did say this is McCaffrey famously and battled cancer as a young man, as a boy, and he said that this leave is not tied whatsoever to his previous battle with cancer. It's purely anxiety driven. And so hopefully he's back and feeling good and better soon, but he will not be available for that game. And that's it's a key game for in just purely basketball terms. Iowa's dropped 4 or 5 and 3 in a row. and it's got a big opportunity there against Indiana on Thursday. That's another big one there. And by the way, Maryland plays at Rutgers on Thursday as well. I don't think you mentioned that off the top as in terms of big ones there, but yeah, UCLA. That's another good one. Any other things to know what you're looking for?
I just think, like you accurately noted, Purdue could go from undefeated, ranked number 1, to a 2-loss team in the span of a few days. One of my favorite little goofy, obvious sayings is like, never lose a game you're supposed to win before you have to play a game you're supposed to lose, because that's how you get a 2-game losing streak. And that is the situation Purdue finds itself in right now. Played a game it was supposed to win on Monday night, lost it, and now at Ohio State, and Ken Pom lists them as a 2-point underdog. So, yeah, they could be a 2.
Can you say that again? What's the thing you like to say?
I like to say a lot of stuff.
I know, but it's
never lose a game you're supposed to win before you got to play a game you're supposed to lose. Now you got a 2-game losing streak.
It's got very big Princess Bride vibes. You fool! You fell victim to one of the classic blunders. Never get in a land war in Asia, and never lose a home game to an unranked team before going on the road at conference play.
You got to perfect it if you're going to use it. You got to perfect it.
Okay.
You'd be driving Nick Saban crazy right now. Nick Saban would not accept that. You know what Nick Saban says?
What is
Nick Saban said? You know what most coaches say? Guys, we're going to keep practicing this till we get it right. We're going to keep practicing this until we get it right. You know what Nick Saban says?
You fool.
He says, guys, we're going to keep practicing this till we never get it wrong. We're not going to keep practicing it till we get it right. We're going to keep practicing it till we never get it wrong.
I need that same energy for your just brutal Horned Frog impression. Keep practicing.
Look at me. I'm a Horned Frog.
Yep, that ain't it.
Frog. Never lose a game you're supposed to win before you have to play a game you're supposed to lose. That's how you end up in a 2-game losing streak. Dead leg. History
never
shows
lose
that.
a game you're supposed to win before you play a game you're supposed to lose.
That's right.
And never get involved in a land war in Asia.
All that's true.
Yep.
I think all that's true.
That's all I got.
Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Huck. Shouts to Larnell. Thank you for listening once again to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple's podcast and Spotify. 5 stars. Leave a nice review at Apple. There's more of us than there are of them. That needs to be reflected in the comments. So please do that. We're going to talk to you again on Friday. Till then, take care.